August 2004. On a deserted beach in California, two young people fall asleep in their sleeping bags. Their wedding is less than a month away. 3 days later, a ranger finds their bodies, both shot with a rifle, never even waking up. No witnesses, no motive, no shell casings in the sand. The investigation will hit a dead end for 13 years. Answers will come only when the man behind it commits another crime, shooting his own brother. And the key piece of evidence will be sitting inside a soda can, hidden in a blackberry bush the entire time. Lindsay Cutshall grows up in the tiny town of Fresno, Ohio, one of those places where everyone knows each other by name and goes to the same church. A religious family, a tight-knit community, horizons framed by the green hills of Coshocton County. Her father is a pastor at the local church. Her mother runs the Sunday school. From childhood, Lindsay sings in the choir, goes on mission trips, and dreams of working with teenagers. She is 20 when she enrolls at Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, a small school tucked away in the mountains where 3 states meet. There, in 2002, she meets Jason Allen, a 24-year-old from Zeeland, Michigan. They share the same faith, the same love of nature, the same dream, to work with young people and spread the word of the Bible. They get engaged 6 weeks after meeting. Friends are surprised by the speed, but never doubt the seriousness. The wedding is set for September 2004. That summer, the couple heads to California. Both take jobs as counselors at Rock and Water, a Christian camp on the American River in El Dorado County. The camp specializes in outdoor adventure for teens, whitewater rafting, rock climbing, sleeping under the stars. Rock and Water sits among the pines and granite canyons of the Sierra Nevada, far from civilization. Exactly the kind of place they have both loved since childhood. Lindsay leads Bible study sessions. Jason teaches kids how to raft. Fellow counselors later recalled the couple constantly making plans, going over guest lists, choosing flowers for the ceremony, debating where to go for their honeymoon. In mid-August, they take a few days off to see the Northern California coast. It is supposed to be a quick trip, a couple of days in nature, the ocean, cliffs, sunsets. Friends at camp wish them a great time. Lindsay and Jason get into a red car and drive west, toward the Pacific shore. Neither of them knows they will never come back. On the morning of August 14, 2004, Lindsay's red car appears on the streets of San Francisco. The couple stops briefly, picks up a few things in the city, and heads north on the coastal highway. 60 miles along the Pacific lie ahead, through the town of Bodega, past rocky coves and overgrown headlands of Sonoma County. Somewhere along the way, they walk into a surf shop and ask the clerk if there is a place nearby where they can camp for the night. By evening, they reach Jenner, a tiny settlement of fewer than 100 people. Jenner sits where the Russian River meets the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by windswept cliffs and eucalyptus groves. Just to the south, beyond a rocky bluff, lies a narrow sandy beach littered with driftwood. Locals call it Fishhead Beach. The only way down is a steep trail from the bluff to the water. The spot is not popular with tourists. There is no real parking, just a dirt pullout on the shoulder above the cliff. A faded sign at the edge prohibits overnight camping, but many people miss it or ignore it. In summer, surfers and drifters sometimes set up tents for the night and leave before dawn. Police rarely check the area. Lindsay and Jason leave their car up top and hike down with backpacks and sleeping bags. The beach is empty. No tents, no campfires, just driftwood and sand. They set up on the sand among pieces of driftwood, a few yards from the ocean's edge. The sound of the surf drowns out any noise from above. The couple falls asleep under the open August sky, unaware that someone else is already watching this beach. 3 days pass. The red car is still parked on the shoulder above the bluff. On August 18, 2004, a state park ranger notices it during a routine patrol along the coast. The vehicle is clearly abandoned, doors locked, a layer of morning dew on the hood. The ranger runs the plate through the database and gets the owner's name, Lindsay Cutshall. He decides to climb down to the beach. The trail is steep, rocks crumbling underfoot. Below, among a pile of driftwood, he sees 2 bodies, a man and a woman lying in sleeping bags, motionless. The ranger calls the police. By the time Sonoma County Sheriff's investigators reach the scene, the picture becomes clearer. Both have been shot with a .45-70 caliber rifle. Neither Lindsay nor Jason managed to get out of their sleeping bags. Everything points to the attack happening while they were asleep, or had just started to wake. Backpacks nearby contained documents confirming both identities. On the sand, not far from the bodies, investigators find an empty 40-ounce bottle of camo beer with traces of DNA on the neck. No shell casings, no signs of a struggle, no witnesses. Fish Head Beach is so remote that no one could have heard the gunshots. The investigation begins, and it will be a long one. In the first days of the investigation, Sonoma County Sheriff's detectives comb the area around Jenner. They interview residents, check firearm registrations, run fingerprints and DNA through available databases. Almost immediately, one name surfaces: Sean Michael Gallen. He is 25 years old. He lives in Forestville, a small community just a few miles from the coast, in the same Russian River area. Gallen is not a new face to local police. By 2004, he already has more than a dozen contacts with Sonoma County law enforcement. Arrests for poaching abalone, trespassing, driving under the influence. In the small Russian River community, he is known as a loner with a reputation for being strange and unpredictable. He hunts wild boar in places few people venture, builds homemade weapons, collects scrap metal, and behaves in ways that make neighbors keep their distance. Locals said Gallen could spend hours walking forest trails along the river, talking to himself. Nobody knew how he earned a living. He would occasionally show up at bars in Guerneville and Monterrey, but would quickly pick a fight and leave. 6 days after the bodies are found on Fish Head Beach, Gallen is arrested on an unrelated charge: possession of stolen property and illegal possession of firearms. Detectives seize the opportunity and question him about the Jenner Beach case. Gallen answers but gives nothing concrete. There is no direct evidence linking him to the beach shooting, no fingerprints at the scene, no DNA match, no witnesses. Gallen is released. He stays on the list of persons of interest, but there is formally nothing to charge him with. The investigation keeps searching. While Gallen sits in county jail on the stolen property charge, he makes a phone call. He dials his father, David Gallen. The request is short and specific. Get rid of the weapons left at the house, the ones the police did not find during the arrest. David does not ask unnecessary questions. He will later admit to investigators that he carried out his son's request because he was afraid his son was unstable. Exactly which weapons he destroyed and how he did it remain unclear, but the consequences of that phone call will stretch across 13 years. When detectives arrive with a search warrant for Gallen's apartment, they find no weapons at all, no rifle, no ammunition, no parts. Without the murder weapon, the case stalls. The DNA from the camo beer bottle found on the beach is checked against forensic databases, but there are no matches. The profile is saved, but it leads nowhere. There is no other evidence pointing to a specific individual. Gallen formally remains on the list of suspects, but there is nothing to charge him with. The case receives widespread coverage in California and national media. A young couple shot in their sleep on a beach just weeks before their wedding. A story that draws the attention of journalists and the public. Theories, speculation, and rumors appear, but none of them leads to an arrest. The investigation stalls, and the key piece of evidence, the weapon, has already been destroyed by the hands of a man who knew his son better than he would ever want to admit. The beach shooting is not Sean Gallen's first act of violence in 2004. 2 months before Lindsay and Jason are killed, in June, an explosion rocks the town of Monterrey. Gallen plants a homemade explosive device under the car of John Robles, a man he had gotten into a bar fight with a few years earlier. Robles does not come out to his car that morning. Instead, his partner, Parvone Leal, picks up the box. The grenade goes off in her hands. The blast is powerful enough to shake the house next door, where Robles is inside with family. Leal suffers severe injuries, burns, damage to her hands and face. She survives, but her life is changed forever. Surgeons will perform multiple operations, but full use of her hands will never be restored. Investigators document the explosion and search for the person who planted the device, but cannot identify a suspect. The motive is unclear, the pool of suspects too vague. The bombing case goes into the archives as unsolved. 2 months later, in August, the bodies of Lindsay and Jason are found on Fish Head Beach. 2 incidents in the same small area, 2 months apart. But investigators do not connect them. The Monterrey bomb remains an unsolved incident. The beach shooting, a separate case. Gallen's name comes up in both as one of many, but never rises to the top. The connection between the two episodes will only be established years later when Gallen himself starts to talk. Years go by, the case sits frozen. The Sonoma County Sheriff periodically revisits it, reviews the files, conducts follow-up interviews. But there is no breakthrough. In July 2009, on the other side of the country, in the Jemez Mountains of New Mexico, a 62-year-old drifter named Joseph Henry Burgess is killed in a shootout with police. Locals knew him by the nickname Cookie Bandit. For years, he had been burglarizing remote hunting cabins, taking food, boots, and small items. Burgess catches investigators' attention for a different reason. In Canada, he is suspected of a double murder of 2 university students on a beach on Vancouver Island in 1972. The parallels to the Jenner Beach case are hard to miss. A young couple, a remote stretch of coastline, an attack while they slept. Sonoma County detectives obtain a DNA sample from Burgess and compare it to the profile taken from the Camo beer bottle at Fish Head Beach. The result is negative, no match. On top of that, it later emerges that during the period coinciding with the Jenner murders, Burgess was most likely in New Mexico. Cabin burglaries in the Jemez Mountains were recorded around the same time. The false lead is closed. The case goes cold again. 5 years have passed since Lindsay and Jason were killed, and not a single lead has resulted in an arrest. A plastic evidence bag sits in the sheriff's storage, and the real shooter's name still has not been spoken. The Cutshall and Allen families hold memorial services every year. Lindsay's father calls the sheriff's office every August and asks the same question. Anything new? The answer is always the same. Not yet. That same year, 2009, while investigators are testing Burgess's DNA and hitting another dead end, Sean Gallen makes himself known again. This time in Gurneville, a resort town on the Russian River, just a few miles from his home. Gallen fires a homemade bow at 2 men sitting in a car. A homemade arrow strikes the vehicle. The men are unharmed, but the incident causes panic. Police launch a search. Gallen disappears. For 5 weeks, he hides in the woods and back roads of the area he knows well. Residents are terrified. A man with weapons, willing to shoot without reason, is roaming somewhere nearby. Eventually, Gallen walks into the sheriff's office and turns himself in. He is convicted of assault with a deadly weapon. In early 2010, the court sentences him to 3 years in prison. Behind bars, Gallen undergoes a psychological evaluation. In 2011, a psychologist examining him for a disability claim notes loose associations and distorted perception of reality. 2 doctors will later diagnose him with schizotypal personality disorder, a condition marked by antisocial behavior, paranoid thinking, and episodes of psychosis. Gallen himself tells those close to him that after taking a heavy dose of LSD around the age of 21, he became a different person. A psychologist familiar with his history believes the drug merely accelerated a process already underway. Gallen's mental disorder remains largely untreated. He is released after serving his time and returns to the same Russian River area. No social services, no mandatory psychiatric supervision. Gallen settles near his father's house and lives just as he did before the arrest, alone, withdrawn, with access to tools and metal for making homemade weapons. Neighbors notice that after prison he has become even more detached. On March 24, 2017, Sonoma County police dispatchers receive a call from the Gallen family address in Forestville, a shooting inside the house. When officers arrive, Sean Gallen is no longer resisting. On the floor lies his younger brother, Seamus Gallen, 36 years old. He is dead. Sean used a homemade rifle built on an AR-15 platform. Seamus was shot with the homemade weapon. During questioning, Sean explains his motive, a childhood grudge. Years ago, Sean had hit Seamus. Seamus never forgave him. That grudge, according to Sean, had festered for decades, poisoning their relationship. If Seamus had just let it go, none of this would have happened, Gallen tells detectives in the same flat tone he uses to talk about the weather. He is arrested and transported to county jail. News of the shooting spreads quickly through the small Russian River community. Neighbors shake their heads but are not surprised. To them, it is just another episode involving Gallen, a man they had long expected something like this from. But for the detectives who have spent 13 years working the Fish Head Beach case, it is something far bigger. an unexpected turn. Gallon, the very same man who has been on their persons of interest list all along. Now he is sitting in front of them in an interrogation room, charged with another crime. But the investigators know, if he is capable of shooting his own brother over a childhood grudge, the conversation about that night on the beach in 2004 is far from over. The interrogation over his brother's case continues for several days. Investigators steer the conversation carefully, gradually broadening the topic. At some point, they circle back to the Jenner Beach case, the same questions they asked Gallon 13 years ago. But this time, Gallon starts talking on his own. No pressure, no bargaining, no lawyer by his side. "I snapped," he says in the same even voice he used a minute earlier to discuss everyday things. "I just thought, okay, I'm going to start killing people." The investigators conducting the interview exchange glances. 13 years of work, dozens of interrogations, hundreds of pages of case files. And the man across the table begins talking as casually as if he were describing a trip to the grocery store. He describes that night in chilling detail. He tells how he climbed down to the beach, saw two people in sleeping bags, went back to his car for a Marlin rifle in .45-70 caliber, and shot them both. Neither managed to get out of their sleeping bag. Afterward, he collected the shell casings, put them in an empty soda can, and hid it in the blackberry bushes on his father's property in Forestville. When asked about a motive, his answer defies logic. Gallon says the couple brought it on themselves because they were sleeping on a beach where a sign prohibited overnight camping. Investigators verify his account. They drive to David Gallon's property, find the blackberry bushes, and pull out a can containing shell casings, exactly where Sean said they would be. The casings match the weapon's caliber. As for the camo beer bottle found on the beach in 2004, the DNA on it was never definitively linked to Gallon. It may have belonged to a random visitor to the beach. The Sonoma County Sheriff will later tell reporters Gallon knew details that only someone involved in this crime could know. On May 5, 2017, the sheriff holds a press conference and publicly names Sean Gallon as the killer of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. A case once considered hopeless has finally broken open. 2 years pass from the confession to the trial. In May 2018, Gallon is formally charged in the Jenner Beach case, on top of the charges for the death of his brother Seamus and the Monte Rio bombing. The Sonoma County District Attorney's Office prepares the case for a jury trial. But in June 2019, just before the preliminary hearing, Gallon takes a plea deal. He enters a plea of no contest to all charges. In exchange, the prosecution drops its demand for the death penalty. Gallon's attorney insists his client is mentally ill and did not understand the consequences of his actions. The prosecutor pushes back. Gallon collected shell casings, hid them, asked his father to destroy the weapon. These are the actions of a man who understood perfectly well what he was doing. The sentence comes down in July 2019. 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus 94 years for the bomb and other offenses. Gallon will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Both victims' parents are present at the hearing. Lindsay's mother, Kathy Cutshall, walks to the podium and silently pulls her daughter's wedding dress from a bag, white and pink, embroidered with beads. The very dress Lindsay was supposed to wear a month after she was killed. Kathy holds it up before the courtroom and turns to face Gallon. Not a word. The dress speaks for her. Lindsay's father reads a letter from Jason's parents who were unable to attend. Sean Gallon broke our hearts in a way that is impossible to describe. During the hearing, another fact comes to light that explains the 13 years of silence. Father David Gallon admitted that in 2004, he destroyed his son's weapons at his request. That single act effectively paralyzed the investigation for years. Without the murder weapon, investigators lacked their most critical piece of evidence. The case is closed. 15 years have passed from the night on Fishhead Beach to the sentencing in a Sonoma County courtroom. Sean Gallon is serving a life sentence in a California prison. His explanations never formed a coherent picture. The only thing he repeats in interrogations, "I snapped." Doctors document schizotypal personality disorder. His attorney speaks of an untreated illness, but none of these facts explain why 2 sleeping people became targets. There is no motive in the traditional sense. No greed, no jealousy, no revenge. Just a man with a fractured mind, a homemade weapon, and 2 bodies on the sand. Lindsay Cutshall is buried in Ohio, Jason Allen in Michigan. The wedding that was a month away never took place. Their story became one of California's most well-known cold cases. Marquez Vickers wrote a book called Fishhead Beach, a detailed account of the crime and investigation. Episodes of the documentary series, People magazine investigates, and Oxygen's Final Moments brought the case back into the spotlight for millions of viewers. For the Cutshall and Allen families, justice arrived, but the loss remained. For the system, this case became a lesson. The man who destroyed weapons at his son's request faced no criminal charges. At the time of the destruction, Sean had not been formally charged, and proving intent to conceal evidence turned out to be legally impossible. But in practice, that single act gave a killer 13 years of freedom. Fishhead Beach still lies beneath the bluff, south of Jenner. Quiet, rarely visited, swept by the wind. The sign prohibiting overnight camping still stands by the trail. Only now, the place is remembered not for its ocean views. The church in Ohio, where Lindsay grew up, lights 2 candles every September, on the date that was supposed to be the wedding day. Friends from Camp Rockin' Water remember them as a couple who always smiled and were always together. And in the Sonoma County courtroom, a photograph is still kept on file. A wedding dress that was never worn, held above the head of a mother who waited 15 years for justice.